You have found the Jordy Culotta Show right here on YouTube. We go live Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. on the campus of Click Here Digital in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where we serve up premium LSU content. Hard-hitting guests, opinions that you can find Monday through Friday. If you want that, subscribe right here on the link that you see below. Coach Kelly, we're official.
Finally,
I'm
get a
telling
chance to meet you.
Thought I had to get a private audience with the Pope. There's Jordy.
Monday through Friday from 7 to 9. Yeah, you see the notification, we about to go live. We got all your favorite guests, we got them in line. It's the Jordy Culotta Show, come have a good time.
Tearing up, answering the question, and I thought, my God, if she gets offered this job, she's going to take it.
It's just a crazy, fun time at LSU right now. Isn't this what everybody loves?
From the boot to the east to the west coast, no matter where we at, open up the phone lines, come and join the show. Make sure you tell your friends about Jordy Culotta Show, yeah.
Let's go! Let's go!
All right.
Big start. Big day.
Nice start.
It's the Jordy Culotta Show, come have a good time.
Thank you for the time. We'll start with, obviously, LSU falling 45-24. And in the first half of yesterday's game, it's tough to really choose a place to start, right? I mean, for LSU's, waking up this morning, they feel very fraudulent, right? I mean, that felt very Les Miles. That felt very, outside of 2019 Ed Ogeron teams where they're just not prepared. There was the lack of preparation or execution. I think was just glaring, especially on the defensive side, right? Like offensively, I thought that they started the game fantastic. The play call to get Trey Bradford into the open and get him out and running, and then to set up the goal line situation where ultimately you've got 6 downs to score and move the ball 3 yards. And in 6 downs, they lost 8 yards. And you got the feeling there like, man, you got to take advantage of situations like this and games like this. And throughout the first half, I thought it was missed opportunity after missed opportunity. You could say it on both sides. Florida State had bad drops and big drops in big moments. But I tweeted out something that I know I'm never going to be able to live down. But at around the mid-mark of the second quarter, I tweeted out that LSU's the better team. LSU's clearly the better team. They just need to finish. Because of the opportunities that they had in the first half and the way that they were moving the ball. I mean, they were really kind of chipping and chunking off yards at will. I mean, they were just kind of moving the ball up and down the field, but they ultimately couldn't push it in. They couldn't convert on some fourth downs. They left the ball in the red area a lot last night. So it felt like, man, some of these missed opportunities are going to haunt them. And, it was a great example of why I thought, when we say, when you got an opportunity to put a team away, you got to take it. You got to take that, you got to take advantage of that. And with LSU not doing that and leaving, not the door open, because Florida State, like I said, they missed opportunities in the first half as well with some drops. But coming out in the second half, the lack of adjustment for LSU and making the adjustment for Florida State was clearly the difference. I mean, it was such a different football game in the second half. I mean, it was a tale of two teams when you look at that. I mean, LSU comes home this morning limping back from Orlando. Confidence shattered.
Tail between your legs.
I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw LSU pushed around like they were last night.
When it wasn't an Alabama team.
I mean, people getting run over, stiff-armed, pushed out the way, missing tackles. I mean, guys jumping over players and making plays. I mean, LSU looked like a second-rate team last night. I mean, really and truly. And to even take a step back and even talk about it at a bigger picture, I would say that North Carolina and Florida State beat the ever-living hell out of South Carolina and LSU respectively, both in that sense. If you want to take away anything from the weekend, for me, one of the biggest surprises outside of the performance of Colorado and Dion and all of the what happened with Colorado, and we'll talk a little bit about that before we get out of here, was just the way that the ACC shellacked the SEC in the form of North Carolina. Just had 9 sacks against South Carolina. And then Florida State scoring 31 on LSU in the second half and beating them up and almost bullying them in the process. Like, I mean, they were toying with LSU in the second half.
That was my bigger issue, is that LSU is usually not the team that gets pushed around like that. And I think Florida State came out with the mindset of doing that. You saw the personal fouls all over the field, but they didn't give a shit because they were saying, we're here to play. This is how this game is going to go. We're playing prison football. And LSU never stepped up to it. They just kind of got bullied, which is, in my lifetime, never really happened to me watching an LSU game. I mean, honestly. No, I'm, Alabama, at least you went toe-to-toe, and you're like, it was, the physicality was there.
Well, LSU looked small. Like, they looked undersized. I mean, they didn't look like a definite. They don't look like a top 5 team. And they just,
that's going to be tough to shake from everybody's eyeballs.
Absolutely.
Like, when you talk about polls and things of that nature, like,
they're tumbling.
That's a black eye that you're going to have to wear, and it's not the end of the world, but the way that team carried itself is a huge red flag in my mind. Whenever you rolled over and died.
It was as bad of a performance as could have happened for LSU. I mean, and look, I don't want to take anything away from Florida State, because
they seemed to be good, but they also did the same thing LSU did. There was drops on both sides of the ball wherever it was, a third. But LSU has to get off the field on third down. That was the biggest killer.
Well, I mean that defensively, I mean,
giving up 3rd and 17s, 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 4s, it happens, but it can't happen that consistently to where it felt like the defense could never get off the field.
Matt House should have to have explained himself on why he deserves to get on the plane ride home last night.
He was so good last year, though.
Cool.
Right.
Last night's performance for the defense was shades of times where it just... I will start with Harold Perkins on defense. It is hard. It is difficult to mess a player up like Harold Perkins. But the fastest way to do it is to put him out of position. And last night, not being able to recognize that the game plan that was cultivated on defense and having Harold Perkins in the middle of it was not blown up after the first series is almost... It feels like insubordination when you're watching it last night. It felt so much like Les Miles football, where you're like, does nobody understand why the best player on the field is out of position? I mean, how many times do you have to watch Harold Perkins play on roller skates? I mean, he was being backpedaled with guards and tackles' hands on him, being shoved back by dudes that are 120, 130 pounds more than him, where he's got no shot of making plays, being a disruptor, being around the football, what he does best. They have single-handedly game planned Harold Perkins out of the game, and then made no adjustment to work him back into the game. I mean, well, he played on the edge some. When you recognize, like, hey, him in the middle is not going to work. Maybe down the road it can, or against a team that doesn't have an offensive line as athletic and as big as Florida State. I mean, you're asking him to do something he can't do. So ultimately, you're taking one of the best defensive players in college football and just neutralizing him. And nobody recognized it. Or if they did, they just sat there and swallowed it, just watched it. I mean, at that point, you almost should have charged him admission. Like, make the adjustment and get this guy into a situation where he can make a play. Get out of the odd front. Put 4 down linemen. Put him on the edge. Put Greg Penn in the game. I mean, like, I don't even know football. But, I mean, damn. How do you mess a player up like that? I mean, look, I remember in the spring when the reports were coming out that he was working at middle linebacker, I came on here and went berserk. Like, what are you doing? And then the explanation came out, well, you're teaching him how to play. He's not going to play there. He's got to be able to go to the combine and be at a position. He's got to know how to play linebacker, which, okay, but not really. I mean, are we really worried about Harold Perkins at the combine? He's going to go there and set records. If they don't draft Harold Perkins at the next level, that's not your problem. If somebody can't recognize that Harold Perkins is one of the best football players in the country, it's not on you. It's on you to win games for LSU. Not to make sure that Harold Perkins tests well at the combine and has a position in the NFL. It makes no sense. I mean, how could you not put him back in the position where he was last year against Arkansas? Against Alabama? On down the line. How can you not be a football coach, look at that and say, hey, we might have the best player in the sport. We can't put him out of position. It'd be like playing Malik Neighbors at tight end. I mean, that was mind-boggling last night to watch Harold Perkins down after down, play after play, just get caught in the wash of the offensive line.
Special.
I mean, like playing on roller skates. He's backpedaling. He can't get off the block. Guys are just shucking him down the field for 15, 10 yards at a time. I mean, it was like, make an adjustment. Get this guy get him out of the middle of the field. I mean, it was...
I get what they're trying to do. I do, because there's a world where Harold Perkins is special, and both, like, you want to see if you can get 10 out of 10 out of him. But when the game was going the way that it was, and even the way that he was spying Jordan Travis, it felt like that felt awkward for him. Like, he was still trying to play in zone coverage. He was looking around, like, you could see him turn his head and look around, where he's like, I'm not sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And when you have a player like that, hunt, go, kill, do the thing that you do well. If it gets even, like, that's the thing that disappointed me the most in the LSU game was the lack of second half adjustments when Florida State clearly made them. That's what Matt House hung his hat on last year, was being able to come back into the game and say, okay, this isn't working, this is what we're going to do. The only time he didn't make an adjustment was Tennessee, and that game was so far gone, it didn't matter. I expected LSU to come back into the second half. You're winning. You're up 17-14. You give up a field goal, fine. 17-17 all square. We're good. But the defense after that gave up 31 straight points. And at that point, what are you doing? Like, you never changed anything. And I will also say this about the offense. Denbrock rolled out the same exact offense we saw last year. Everybody knew what was coming when Mason Taylor was going in motion, and you go for it on fourth down, which I liked. I like going for it on fourth down both times. But you have to have different plays in your back pocket that they've seen the tape. Like the offense that kind of got you rolling and got you to the SEC West champions in the SEC championship, people have seen it. The book is out. You have to be able to make adjustments. This throwing it to the wide side of the field and throwing 8-yard curls, that's not going to get it done. And Florida State showed you that. They were sitting on everything. There was no explosive plays. That wasn't, hey, get the ball to the playmakers. I get that. But there's no throw the ball down the field, which I'm also fine with. But the way that they schemed up the first 5 plays, that was it. After that, it was back to 2022 football.
Well, you saw when they were stopped on one of the fourth downs, Brian Kelly got into the headset and
said, God damn it.
Run the effing ball outside.
What do we
Get the
do?
ball
Because it was a pull.
outside.
It was a pull.
I mean, just running the ball into the middle of the offensive line. I'll get to the offense in a little bit, but the Harold Perkins situation has got to be adjusted today. Like the defense, first and foremost, the defense is way overhyped. Look, I think that Mason Smith is going to make, he's going to make a difference when he gets there. And they were just going at the hole that Mason Smith had left behind last night. Mekhi Wingo's a big time player. I mean, he is so quick,
all heart
off of the line. I mean, he's talent too. I mean,
I know, but I'm saying, when you marry both of them, that's what it looks like.
He's got a high motor.
Yes.
We talked up Savion Jones last night. Savion Jones is a long way off from being that first round pick that we talked about.
I think that was a lot of scheme too.
Well, I mean, he was getting sucked inside. I mean, he was giving up the edge all night. I mean, there were times where you would look up and, I mean, he was 3 yards, 4 yards into the line of scrimmage. You know, I mean,
he got caught a couple times.
It's things that you can get fixed. But I thought for sure that you would have seen guys like Deshaun Womack or guys that we've heard about in the offseason where you just weren't getting any plays from guys. And then in the defensive backfield, they are in deep trouble. Like, they are in sincere trouble. Florida State's wide receivers might be the best group that they face all season. I mean, Keon Coleman and big boy, I don't know why his name is escaping me right
Wilson?
now. No, Johnny Wilson. I mean, those guys, and Wilson had some just monumental drops, but once they started to make the catches, Keon Coleman last night, 9 grabs, 122 yards,
cool.
3 touchdowns. He didn't drop a pass. I mean, he made LSU's, all of them, every single one of them. Anybody who checked him made him look like a first-round pick, top overall wide receiver. I mean, that guy was a superstar last night and did it against everybody that LSU threw at him. But everybody that LSU put out there, I mean, look, we talked up Sage Ryan a lot in the offseason of a guy that's going to step in there and play, and Brian Kelly said it last week when the reason why he was on the field was – one of the reasons why he was on the field was because of his open field tackling. His first opportunity last night, he whiffed on an open field tackle.
And it's not just him.
No,
the entire defense was a lot. They were dragging LSU around.
But the defensive backs and the way that late in the game getting run over, I mean, you know, look, it's not Deuce Chestnut's fault, but I mean, another Matt House decision of you put a 5'10" cornerback on a 6'4" wide receiver inside the red zone on an island. I mean, maybe you don't have the options. Maybe that's the all you can do, but no way, right? Like, no way. And I know that Denver Harris didn't make the trip last night.
Oh.
And I know that he's been in some, in some hot water with the program. But what you got him for? What you gonna do with that? You can't play 5'10" on the outside in the SEC.
I mean,
you can't play with when you're just you got a revolving door of guys where you're saying who's going to be the guy, who's going to be the guy, who's going to be the guy, and Denver Harris is sitting in the locker room. I get principle and accountability and all that stuff, but I looked at that LSU team last night, and a lot of it looked like they gave up. There was no effort. There was no will to win. There was no desire to win. If that's the mentality of the team, and you're telling me that Denver Harris isn't making, he can't make it because he's a couple of minutes late for the team meal. Well, I get what you're trying to do, but it ultimately comes down to winning football game. Denver Harris has to play. Point blank. Period. If that's the selection at cornerback, Denver Harris has to play, or LSU potentially is going 7-5. 8-4.
I'll buck back with you there because I don't think it's the sky is not falling. I don't think it's that it's a long season. You've been able to see an LSU team make adjustments. We watched it literally 1 year ago, wherever they lost a game. This game feels worse than the Florida State game does last year, but I still believe in the coaching staff and what they have put in place. That said, the quit in the team is it's just one game. It's not a conference game. Your season's not over. But I did not like the way that the team. It just felt like they were unprepared for some reason when you knew this was on the docket for an entire year.
Did you watch the weekend of football? Did you watch Alabama? Did you watch Georgia? Did you watch Tennessee?
Yeah, but no, they didn't all play Florida State. Florida State's not bad.
They didn't, but they executed.
LSU's 2 plays away from making that game viable.
Yeah, but I look at LSU's personnel and I look at Alabama's wide receivers. They can't guard them. I'm not saying that the sky is falling, but I mean, if Alabama can throw the ball like that, I don't care who it's against. Jalen Milroe was one of the winners of the weekend.
Absolutely.
And if that's what they look like at wide receiver, and that's what LSU looks like at DB, where they're swinging the door trying to find somebody.
Well, you had Major Burns walking down in one-on-one coverage when they did a 3-by-1 set, and your safety, everybody in the room I was with was like, that doesn't even watch football the way that we do. Was like, well, that's a one-on-one matchup, a guy with a cowboy collar on. What do you think's going to happen? It's not Major Burns' fault, but they got him in a set where
it's not Major Burns' fault.
Yeah,
but that's the personnel.
But you got to get in a different set. What are we looking at here? If I'm seeing it, what do you think that Matt House is looking at? Like, oh no, this is the look we want to be in.
I mean, that's what I'm telling. Like that's what I'm saying. LSU's in trouble.
And
I mean, the sky's not falling. I mean, like
that's what I'm saying.
They can make adjustments.
But I thought they would have done it in the second half. What they did in the second half is cause for concern. The only thing I will say is that as soon as Florida State got the news, they may have known before even LSU did that he wasn't going to play. But they ran where he was supposed to be all night. They took advantage of Mason Smith not being in that game, and there was no two bones about it.
I mean, look, that's good coaching, right?
Right.
I mean, like that's taking advantage of key spots that are out. But you know, from LSU's defensive standpoint, they have a
lot of work to do today.
Long way to go. I mean, like when you look around, there is no sign of there was no sign of life late in that game. That was one of the other concerning parts. I mean, like LSU not only getting shoved around and beat up and bullied, but like there's that dog mentality, that no quit, that coming at you for 4 quarters. I mean, that was just gone last night. I mean, that's something last night in competition, in sports, in football, that's hard to recover from. Like, I mean, a performance like that could haunt you.
You rolled over and got your belly patted like a dog. Like Florida State, like I said, Florida State came in there with the mentality of, we're going to get 3 personal fouls and we don't care. They threw Aaron Anderson into the bench, and they threw Jaden Daniels into the bench. Like, they put him into the ground. They knew that those were going to be penalties and did not care. LSU didn't have that, and it killed LSU. They were a walking 8 count in the second half. After Florida State scored again, after they made it 17-17, LSU punched it back to them. And then, no, it was the interception. And then it goes 31-0 run, and LSU was dead in the water, and didn't care. There was no sign of fight, no penalties, no, do something. Go try.
It was alarming, man. I mean, they showed Jaden Daniels snapping his helmet off after that just terrible interception on the sideline.
Well, Malik slipped.
No, I know, but I mean, it was like it had like an Aaron Brooks feel to it, where it was like a smile. You know what I mean?
What's going on?
It was just nobody was. I mean, competing. Nobody was caring. Nobody was. It was alarming.
That's frustrating.
It was alarming, man. It was just when you were watching that, it was just like, oh no, the bottom is about to fall out of this thing.
And that was my biggest takeaway from watching the game. Once I felt like LSU was going to lose, it was the quit where I was like, this team not even. Yeah. And I feel like they'll be able to get that back, but they need to look at that and go, hey, this isn't LSU football. Brian Kelly's going to watch that, and if I'm the coach, I'm running back only the second half. Look at who's playing. Why are you here? Yeah. Because that game wasn't out of hand until y'all let it get out of hand.
The film session is going to be most important for the coaches.
But I think that's the disconnect. Maybe they quit because they're like, what scheme are we running?
Not the – I mean, you know, like the
I never blame a player.
I'm not trying to pick on any of the players, but overnight you're not going to be able to go into the transfer portal or go into free agency and find defensive backs. And if those are the issues that LSU has in game one, I don't know how you resolve that other than playing your best players. Like, you have to play your best players to overcome some of the deficiencies that LSU saw defensively last night. But the biggest concern for me was Harold Perkins being out of position, the lack of second-half adjustments, and then just the personnel issues that LSU were really going to fight all season long. And I'm just trying to be as nice as possible when you say that. I mean, you know, they're just not going to be able to produce DBU overnight. It's just not going to happen. So remember, daily, we are brought to you by our friends over at Go Roof, online at geauxroof.com. You can get there and find them online at geauxroof.com, or you can call them at 225-927-8300. You can get a 2-year free workmanship guarantee with all new roof installations. 225-927-8300 is the phone number. You can count on Go Roof for roof repair, roof installation, and roof maintenance. Online, geauxroof.com, 225-927-8300. 225-927-8300. A beautiful roof every single time from our friends over at Go Roof, geauxroof.com. Offensively, on the offensive side of the ball, my biggest takeaway is that the offseason where the development was preached on Jaden Daniels and the ability to now take shots down the field, I thought still when you watch him play, there is a certain hesitancy to just let the ball go still. And I thought Daniels played well last night. I really did. I mean, there's not much more that he could have done. I thought the biggest part of Daniels' criticism, I would say, is that there's a lack of chemistry between he and any wide receiver, especially Malik Neighbors, the number one wideout on this team. I mean, Malik Neighbors had 13 targets last night and 6 catches. That's tough. I mean, like, you could see Neighbors on a lot of them was looking at Daniels kind of like, you know, I mean, put the ball up or throw the ball outside. I mean, even like kind of that first fade into the end zone, I mean, the ball hits the back of the cornerback. You know, I mean, like, Malik Neighbors is like, throw it up. You know, like, give me a chance. Give me a shot. And, I mean, some of the drops were costly, obviously, in the second half. But the lack of chemistry between quarterback and a wideout, specifically your number one target wideout, I thought in game one was discouraging, right? I also, on all of the talk of, you know, being able to throw the ball down the field this season, I thought they had opportunities to do that last night, and there was still this hesitancy of just let it go. Like, just throw it. Put the ball out there. And, you know, offensively, I would say the same thing about what we said defensively. You know, except from a defensive standpoint, they took what was happening last year and successful and blew it up. Offensively, they took what was happening last year and was successful and didn't really add anything to it.
No evolution.
There's no next step. I mean, I would have assumed that in the second year of an offense where you're working together with the nucleus, I mean, think about it. Think about all of the returning guys offensively. When you talk about the offensive line, all 5 of them returned. Talk about the quarterback. He's back. The wide receiver group. I mean, 3 of your top 4 guys are back. The running back room. I mean, a lot of those guys were here last year. They're all being coached by Brian Kelly, Mike Denbrock, Frank Wilson, Brad Davis, Cortez Hay, same group that was here last year. So in year 2 of working together in the offense, you would think that it would be much more expansive. I mean, I would imagine that Jaden Daniels would be calling checks at the line of scrimmage, that there would be certain things of, the next tier of the offense where when you recognize this, not only can you check into this, you can also run that, right? But it looked the same. I mean, that Mason Taylor play where he scored against Alabama was a beautiful play. It's a beautiful play. But when they come out and that's their toss dive, that's their security blanket. That's when they start to kind of get into a situation where you're like, what do we need to run? Like, well, run that tight end waggle, that read option, where if you see it a couple of times on film and you're a good defensive coordinator, it's pretty easy to tip off. I mean, Mason Taylor's kind of off the line. He's going to go in motion. Once you have the responsibility figured out of, hey, you take the quarterback, you take the tight end, you take the running back, it becomes a little bit more difficult in the moment to read it. Is it still going to work? Yeah, but you can't run it 8 times a game. So, I mean, the lack of evolution, and then, from the personnel standpoint, I know Florida State's defensive line is stiff, man. That is a hell of a group, and, you got multiple pros there, but the offensive line, specifically on the right side, they were bullied last night. I mean, they were shoved around. They couldn't get a yard when they needed a yard. They couldn't get into the end zone in 6 tries to start the game. I mean, it was just things that you were hoping and thinking in the offseason, like, this is going to be better. The offensive line playing together in the second season is going to have a real big opportunity. And look, I'm not here to judge them on one game.
Right.
And I know that they are going to have their moments of, like Saturday, where you've got some setbacks. It was concerning to see that they were getting just manhandled.
Bullied. I expected to see Zalance hurt at some point.
Well, I think that you think if they're getting pushed around, that you can't break that kid's confidence in game 1. I
I don't think he had a lot.
If Emory Jones is getting pushed into the backfield like he was, Jones is a good player.
I agree, but I'm saying, because everything that you said is right. Because they knew that they couldn't go on the left side. Will Campbell held his own all night, so they moved their number 1 pick that came back, and they put him on. And Jared Verse, they moved him to the right side, and that's when they started to get pressure on Jaden Daniels. And if you're LSU, do you not look at that and say, hey, Emory, maybe we slide you over. I don't want to put a freshman in the game in that position either, but it got to the point where you might have to make a change because you're getting bullied. Put somebody out there that's a dog, that wants to go put hands on somebody. That's my biggest thing. When you talk about the offense, how many touches did Aaron Anderson have?
I mean, look,
one.
I'm not concerned about that. I mean, I thought Aaron Anderson last night was playing a step slow. I mean, like he was
trying to make a play.
He was thinking, he was overthinking, he was pressing, he was just you got to recognize those things. When I look at the wide receiver room, the first thing I would say is, how the hell did you miss on Keon Coleman? Really and truly, because LSU does not have a true 2. Does LSU have a very talented wide receiver room? Absolutely. They've got a really talented room. When you just walk into the room, you open the door and you're like, wow, look at Brian Thomas. Look at Kyron Lacey. Look at Shelton Sampson. Look at Chris Hilton. I mean, like, Chris Hilton he can't get a snap last night? Like, just one time a game, I would put Chris Hilton out there and either double move him or just tell him, hey, man, run towards the pylon. Jaden, take a 2-step drop. If they man him up, throw it. Just throw it. See what happens. If nothing else, get these people back so maybe you can start running the ball on 4th and 1. I mean, just the lack of creativity, letting guys like that just sit on the sideline. Right? Like, I'm not here to dump on the wide receiver room, but for all that we've heard of, hey, this is a real talented room. This is maybe the most talented room in the league, maybe one of the most talented rooms in the country. I mean, there's no true 2, and there's still key drops in moments that, I mean, if Kyron Lacy catches,
the game's different.
It's a totally different game. It's a totally different game.
And that's why I don't want to put it on one person because Kyron Lacy knows, and he's by all regard, he works hard. Like it happens. Like you're going to drop balls. Florida State drop balls. Like that's the things that are happening, and that's fine, especially in game 1. But my bigger issue is the fact that the offense. You talk about utilizing like skill players, Chris Hilton. There was no formula. There was no chemistry in that offense. It looks like you're calling a play sheet from Madden, where it's like, oh, comebacks. Make Jaden Daniels throw it from the far hash to a hook on the other side of the field. That's how you get picked off. It was that kind of thing where you didn't utilize your playmakers at all. That's not on Jaden Daniels. That's on the plays that you're putting on the field. Like, we don't have an identity, it doesn't feel like, if you're an LSU. Like, if you're an LSU coach, what's your identity? You didn't run the ball. Again, same thing you did last year. There was nobody that ever got to tote the rock except for Jaden Daniels. You have to be able to establish some sort of run fit. If you can't, then you have to mix up the plays and utilize having explosive playmakers. Everything that the receiving yards came from was after the catch. There was no down the field, anything. It was all check down, go. I mean, that's not a scheme. That's just athletes making plays.
In a theme that was very relevant or very consistent last year, Jaden Daniels, again, the leading rusher on the team.
That can't happen.
Last night, 15 carries, 64 yards. The second leading rusher on the team was Josh Williams, who had 4 carries for 44 yards. I mean, just there's no threat of that outside of Daniels, right? And there has to be some type of respect around the run game offensively for the play calling to be efficient. It's just, look, man.
They couldn't get a push offensively.
I know. They couldn't get a push on either side of the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and that's supposed to be the strength.
They were getting shoved on defense. They were getting shoved back, and on offense, they were getting shoved back. I mean, it was as bad of a showing as LSU could have made in opening week as you could have asked for.
LSU, Wisconsin.
Right? No. I mean, I think the build-up for this one was even bigger. You know, I mean, I think the build-up, I mean, and look, we're in this moment, so maybe,
right.
You know, I mean, it's
too close to it.
Easy to speak in the vacuum, but, I mean, this team was
playoff potential.
Yeah, man, playoff potential. I mean, it just last night's letdown on a national stage. That was that was a weekend of LSU regressing. On Friday, you lost the state's best player to Texas A&M, Dominic McKinley, the top recruit in the state, pledged his commitment to Texas A&M. You talk to a lot of people around recruiting. It seems like it's over. It doesn't seem like LSU can get back into the mix, or at least they're going to have to make a big push for them to get into the mix. And then on Sunday, after a buildup of summer and off season, and even a buildup of the weekend. I mean, if you were watching the college football weekend shows, LSU, Florida State, they were building this thing up, man. I mean, they were going to make sure that you were going to watch it. And then for, LSU to get to the stage and perform like that, I mean, just real big dings on the brand over a 72-hour period when you're talking, just football on, just kind of the state of it, right? I mean, you got to get Wardell Mack. I mean, if that's your defensive back problems, you have got to get the state's best defensive back. I mean, I got a lot of faith in Frank Wilson in New Orleans. I got a lot of faith in Frank Wilson recruiting LSU, but the premium on Wardell Mack just went through the roof after watching last night. Not only for the production on the field, but you have got to get back to recruiting top-line defensive back talent especially from the state of Louisiana. You've got to get the state's top DB. I mean, how big of a miss is Desmond Ricks?
Right.
I mean, the state, the nation's number one cornerback last year.
You had Andre Sam, who's in his 7th year making plays.
But then knocked out on the field.
But, well,
but
I'm just saying, but that was the highlight. You're
right.
like, oh, maybe he's a player, which I think he is, but it's just that's how deep down into the bucket you have to go. That's the frustrating part. And like I said, I think it's more scheme than player. They just didn't – everybody seemed a little discombobulated, whether it be on offense and defense, where you talked about Harold Perkins. It never felt like he knew exactly what he was supposed to do. He was trying to do too much almost. And then you look at offense, you have a great first 5 plays, and your offensive line, which is Brian Kelly's calling card, is getting bullied. You run, 8 plays inside the 2 and can't score? That's what you hang your hat on. And then Matt House, a guy that people are terrified of leaving because he might get a head coaching job, doesn't make a single adjustment.
No, I mean,
and then your team gets punked, absolutely punked in the second half.
Bad night for LSU coaches, program. I mean,
but I don't think it's that big a deal.
There's nowhere to spell it. I mean, their season goals are still in front of them.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can still accomplish everything you want to accomplish. The turnaround and the mountain just got a lot steeper. Excuse me.
Bless you. Bless you.
I'm
sick too.
I think it's coming on.
No, it's from last night.
Yeah.
Sick of it.
Miserable.
Can't have it. Can't win with it.
Thanks for tuning in to our premium LSU content right here on YouTube. If you want more of it, subscribe below.